All right, this is going to be lesson 2.2 for Math 1 on solving equations. And we'll go and start with the warm-up. And so for this problem here, we do have 5 problems that we're going to work in the warm-up. And so my recommendation, pause the video, work out all these problems the best you can, and then unpause so you can get feedback on your understanding. As a reminder, just once you do a problem like this or set of warm-ups, if there were some things that were confusing that you didn't figure out, please come ask me when you show me these notes, so you can get credit for the time you missed. But this is really a best way to kind of recreate what happens in class. As far as if you have questions, you can ask them. You just have to do it after the fact. So we're going to go ahead and have you pause the video, work the problems, and then we will review the answers together. All right, so I'm going to go and work the first one. So this is a $15 tip on a $12.30 dinner. What is the cost before the tip? So this is if the tip was $12.30. Okay, so this is the tip amount, not the dinner, cost of the dinner. So we want to know what was the cost before before the tip. So this is going to be the original value, right? The tip is the part. So you know the part, 15% is the part. We want to find the original. And we talked about in lesson 2.1, if you want to find the original value, this is going to be a division problem. You're going to take your 1230 and you're going to divide it by the percent. And so we will take the $12.30, divide it by the 0.15, and that is your original value, 82. So $82 was the original cost prior to the tip of the meal. Or in other words, you're tipping $12.30 on $82. All right. Number 2, you and a friend earned $240 house sitting. It's decided that since you were there more, you would get 2/3 of that money. So how much do you get? Well, whenever you want to find a percent of something or a fraction of something, that is a multiplication problem. So really, this is just 2/3 times 240. And so we'll multiply the top, so 2 times 240. And remember, anytime you do a whole number, it's even with the numerator. So you get 480 divided by 30. And then if we do 480 divided by, sorry, I said 30, it's 3. It's 480 divided by 3, and you get 160. There's another way to think of this. You take the $240, you're dividing it up into 3 sections. And a lot of times I have people thinking that with this type of problem that you would divide by the fraction. But actually the fraction, the division is already built in to the fraction, the 2/3. You have a denominator. So this is dividing by 3. So you actually multiply by the fraction because you do get division happening. So another way to think of it, well, what if you took the $240 and you divided it into 3 sections? That would be 3 sections of 80, right? And you are going to get 2/3 of the money. So of the 3 separate portions, dividing the money into 3 groups, you get 2 of those groups. And 80 plus 80 is 160. So just a reminder, if you're finding the percent of something or the fraction of something, this is a multiplication problem. All right, let's go to number 3. Survey is done to see how often people wear jeans. They observed 245 people walk in the mall, and 115 of these people were wearing jeans. What percent wore jeans? So just a reminder, when we have a fraction, we have our original, or total, or whole. That's what goes on the bottom. And then this is going to be the part of the whole, right? And so in this case, the total number of people that were observed was 245, so that goes on the bottom. And the part that wore jeans was 115. So just remember, when you're dealing with this, you want to think about this bottom number. And the reason I have 3 terms is because it really depends on the situation what number fits best. I wouldn't call the 245 the original. It may be the whole, but I think total fits both. If we look at the problem up ahead, the previous one, we said the cost before the tip, that was your original. So once again, it would still be like a bottom value. But so it is the bottom that you're looking for in this case. But we aren't building the fraction from that because we're dealing with the percent. Here, we are looking for the percent, so we need to build this fraction. And now we divide. Please remember, when you divide fractions, it is top divided by bottom. You put the top number first, you put the bottom number last. And sometimes I have people reverse it because they think they got to do big divided by small. But when you're doing percents, it's almost always the opposite. So when I do that division, double check my numbers, 115 divided by 245, 115 divided by 245, yep, we get 0.469 whatever. So it doesn't go exact, so we're going to have to make a decision on where to round. I think I'll bring this out 3 decimal places, and then to change this into a percent, we can multiply by 100, and you get 46.9%, and that winds up being your answer. All right, so for your next problem, we're going to be doing property tax for residential property in Aurora is 7.05%. The median home value is around $450,000. What is the property tax for a home using the values above? So this is, we just want to find what is 7.05% of 450,000. So we're just going to multiply that. 450,000. Times, and then we change this percent to a decimal, 0.705. And we wind up with 31,725. Okay? And I'm not sure if this is exactly how I was looking at this problem. That seems really big for property tax. So I'm thinking they do this differently, like there's an assessed value, so you don't pay the property tax on the full amount here, that they have a way to do an assessed value that makes it much smaller. Have to do some research exactly on how that works out, because I know that it can't be 31,000. I mean, that's someone's yearly pay for just the tax alone, so it's got to be different than that. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the last problem. So here there's a gym. They charge $20 to join. It's $5 for each class you attend. How much would it cost if you went to 1 classes or 2 classes or 3 classes? Well, we went ahead and built a table here. So we know if you go to 0 classes, it's $20. If you take 1 class, then the total is $25. 2 classes would be $30, and essentially we're increasing by 5. So 35, 40, 45. So what rule models this situation? How would we find these values without a table? Well, we know that we are paying $20 plus we're doing $5 for each class. So this would be 5 times the number of classes. So that's kind of your rule. You start with 20, and then you add $5 this number of times, right? However many classes you're taking. So if you wanted 12 classes, you do 20 plus 5 times 12, right? And that would give you the value for 12 classes. So 20 plus 5 times 12 is 80. So this would be $80. Now, this is very wordy, like to have to write the number of classes each time you want to write like an equation like this. And so mathematicians are like, well, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? So they came up with a better way than writing all this out. Now, I like this because it helps us remember what this represents. But they might just use like a variable C. So C is the number of classes. And so they might write 20 plus 5C. And so this is 5 times the number of classes, but instead of writing out the number of classes, they'll just use a letter to represent that. So we know this C represents either 2 classes or 3 classes or 4 classes or whatever. Okay, the last one is, how many classes did a gym member take if they were charged $75? Well, 12 classes is 80, so it seems like it should be pretty close to 12. If it's $5 per class, we could probably just think maybe 11, try 11 and plug that in and see if it works. But what we're really saying is that the $75, let me rewrite this, sorry. This 20 plus 5C equals 75. So we're really saying the $20 plus the $5 times the number of classes, that winds up being $75. So how do we find this value? Now, like I said, we can do a guess and check, and if you try to plug in 11, you do get 20 plus 55, which is 75, so that is the correct answer. But what happens if it's not as easy to see like that, and if it was a harder situation? So what we're going to learn is a process how to find this answer without doing a guess and check. Sorry, I apologize, that wasn't on there. So we did 20 plus the 5 times the 11. 5 times 11 is 55. When you add that, you get a 75. So using the check method, oh, I think it's 11. It is 11. Great. But there is a method to solve this. And the method's pretty important because in some problems, guess and check isn't a great method. It could take just a huge amount of time to do it. And so, once again, mathematicians want to be more efficient, so they devised a way to find this value of C without doing a guess and check. All right, so that is the end of page 1 for these notes. Please continue on to page 2.